The life and stories of Alfred can easily be accessed. Whether all the stories are real or not will always be up for debate. But what we are going to talk about is Alfred as that archetype of human, of a seizure king, a fisher king, a sacred king, a shaman king. This class of human that goes back tens of thousands of years, people who are effectively mystics in the way you might think of as a monk or prophet living off in the mountains, entering ecstatic states, having visions and contemplating the secrets of the universe. Well, this class of king is a tier above that, because rather than a hermit, they are at the very center, and their contemplations are channeled into running a kingdom, and as living cores of an entire land and people. They are athletic warlords, brilliant strategists, shrewd politicians, honest judges, clever inventors, genius innovators, spiritual guides. The sacred or seizure king is the absolute pinnacle of human potential, physical, wise, creative, in body, mind, spirit. Not to say they are completely balanced or perfect people, just that they are able to rise to the occasion, push themselves beyond the limits, sacrifice parts of themselves, and change the course of history. Alfred did more than turn a few key battles and use clever politics to establish peace and trade. He recognized the problems faced by his people, the challenges of a fierce enemy, and acknowledged that the settlers from Daneland were there to stay, and that being king meant more than just the Saxon, but people from all over the land. He saw why the other kingdoms fell to the Vikings and how to take steps to reverse this. He dreamt of a unified place called England, although it would be his grandson Ethelstan that would finally see his vision come true and build England. This class of sacred king has several important features that are found in every iteration across the world, what we can call the four primary qualities of true kingship in the human race. They are one with the land and people, the fisher king. They are the best, excelling at everything they do, the sacred king. They are master of dreams, navigating towards the future, the shaman king, and they include all the characteristics of mystic visions, the seizure king. In the fisher king aspect, the king is tied to the land, the very regulation of it, the currency of energy that travels like arteries and veins to and from the king. He is the beating heart of the land, the will of the people. The king is the source of fortune and misfortune. His vitality is the fertility of crops, his mind is the state of the country, and his strength the determination of his people. Shortcomings, mistakes, and sins reflects onto the land. The king becomes the spirit that ties his kingdom together, the spider at the web of fate. The term fisher king comes from the Arthurian cycle, but is a motif found all around the world, and associates the health of the king with the health of the land and the people he rules. Alfred suffered chronic and crippling pain in his stomach that would trouble him throughout his life since his childhood. He likely bore the weight and anxiety of his people's future in his belly, cultivating that energy and using it to motivate himself, as he saw it as punishment from God for his own failures, and so he pushed himself tirelessly. And, like Alfred, the kingdoms had been gutted by the great heathen army and were suffering. Alfred would certainly be a fisher king as he immersed himself in the daily labor of his people, and put his people before himself, and would judge cases and overturn injustices. He sought for the reformation of laws, taxes, and brought education. He personally helped translate many of the books he wanted his people to read, and encouraged education everywhere he could. Alfred was the lifeline that kept Wessex alive, when he was believed to be dead for a short time after a surprise attack by a Viking king. The Saxons had all but given up. Alfred had been lost and thought dead, his army defeated and scattered. It was in the marshes hiding that many famous stories of Alfred came from. He had lodged with a peasant family who believed him to be a common soldier, and the woman of the house told him to watch the cakes cooking in the oven. However, Alfred fell asleep and the cakes had burned, at which point he was chewed out by her. She called him careless and the most negligent man she'd ever seen, that he couldn't even do the simple task of stopping cake from burning. But were the cake in front of him, he'd have no problem rushing to eat it at once. Whether the story is true or not, it demonstrates this burden of Fisher King, how he could not complete something as simple as what a peasant could do, and showed his mistakes in letting Wessex approach destruction, and how the two are related. For a true king must be below a peasant, for how can someone lift up others without being beneath them first? He must know the labors of every trade within the land, and be competent in how they work, so that he can feel these moving parts all together, and see from his kingly status how it works in the grand tapestry of the kingdom and land. He is also unsuspecting as a king, able to move invisible among his own people, for he embodies an almost supernatural spirit nature from the perspective of an ordinary citizen. The Fisher King is one with the land and sea within his domain. He is beloved, humble, and toils tirelessly, awake before dawn and sleeping long after nightfall. The sacred king is the tether between the divine and the mortal realms. He is the living will of God with the gods, intermediates all the spirits, forces, and supernatural creatures that roam the land, the living and dead, the dream and spirit world. In some cases he is chosen, in others he obtains it through merit, either eminence or transcendence. The king is the best. More than a jack of all trades, he is the king of all trades. Alfred was a swordsman and a scholar, the architect of England. He was born to an ever-diminishing kingdom, fifth in line to the throne, though his father's favorite, and named heir to the throne. His father, King Ethelwulf, was unable to defeat the invading Viking horde. Each son took his turn on the throne to defend the kingdom of Wessex, West Saxon. Ethelstan, Ethelbald, Ethelbert, and Ethelred. One by one they were either slain in battle, tortured to death, or fled, lost to the halls of history. When it came down to the fourth-born, Ethelred, and the 21-year-old Alfred as a supporting general, the Viking army was on the verge of entering the heart of Wessex. A battle against the last remaining defenders, which would have turned all of what we know today as England into Daneland. The great heathen army was but a stone's throw from victory. But the battle-hardened veteran and barely adult Alfred led a charge up a hill and secured the Battle of Ashdown, though his brother, the king, fell. There were no more brothers left, and so ready or not, King Alfred would become king, as was ultimately intended. His biographer traces his genealogy back to Woden, as well as to Enoch and Adam, as was customary among royalty, demonstrating the divine lineage of the king. As a boy, Alfred journeyed to Rome to see the Pope with his father, and it was likely his scholarly and religious interests that aligned with his father that gave him the favor to be crowned heir apparent, despite being the youngest brother. The Pope as well consecrated the boy Alfred to be king, and so he also had the favor of Rome. His chronicler describes that despite war, despite governing and daily afflictions of his disease, he never stopped learning new skills, reading, spending hours in prayer and to meditation, and was always wise and kind to both the Saxons and other people, increasing the prosperity of his kingdom at every level, from education to warfare and security. The heathen horde may have been deflected by that valiant battle of Ashdown, but they would return in several years, and so the fate of England would be challenged time and time again. On the military front, he established a series of burhs, which were fortified marketplaces, where armies could stay encamped and food stores protected. No part of Wessex was more than 20 miles from the nearest safe haven. He also had a charter put together of every burh, the amount of men, the size of the fort, and the length of the ramparts. He established a beacon system for fast communication and mobilization, as well as set up a rotating contingent so that soldiers and their farms could be taken care of. Road networks were built, and some of Alfred's street plans in London still exist to this day. He built a navy to defend the coasts and rivers that had been giving the Vikings easy access to good land and loot. It's thought that he drew inspiration from Roman ships and built his longboats twice the size of the Viking ships, which were made for navigation to cross the sea. Alfred's navy was solely for war and defending his land, so they were optimized to maneuver in the familiar waters and could destroy the Viking boats before they even landed. Alfred revised taxes, laws, and promoted writing and reading. He encouraged reading not just for the purpose of religious enlightenment for his people, but so that everything could be recorded, documented, and chartered. His priests that would slowly diffuse Christianity into the Viking mind also doubled as spies, who could write messages regarding the Viking territories and general state of each region. Alfred moved among his soldiers, craftsmen, farmers, blacksmiths, tailors, and other skilled work. He invented candle clocks, a way to measure time by burning equally weighed candlesticks, so that 6 could burn over a 24-hour period, and then had a container made so that the wind would not disturb the rate of the candle burning. He helped translate many books into poems he considered important for education, that he commissioned to have copies made and distributed for the people to learn. He gave designs to goldsmiths, including a famous jewel, an elaborate pointer used in the aid of reading. Alfred flowed between one task to another, one problem to the next, always learning, consuming knowledge, using his advisors, generals, warriors, and priests effectively. The Sacred King does more than be the best. He can bring the best out of those around him, those that put their belief into him, and he has the wit to put them all in the positions that maximize their resourcefulness. And to do this, one must have a decent grasp on all the moving parts of a government, of farming, of training, of any and every labor, of scholarly pursuits, of religion, of bureaucracy, the entire circus of society. The Shaman King leads the way. He is the future of the land. His dreams are omens for the whole kingdom. His skin is the banner of the people. Only the king has the vision of tomorrow and the aptitude to make it come to fruition. Some traditions even reflect the ancient shamanic rituals that would have been performed by their ancestors, such as the royal hunt. The king as warlord must establish his keen skills and dominate the spirit of the land, the way two bulls might compete for the head. This tradition reinforced the king's dominion over land and spirit and law and people. Alfred was an exceptional hunter and frequented the hunting grounds of Somerset as a child. He was skilled in all types of hunt, able to use falcon and hawk and dog. The shaman becomes lord of animals, a game master. In another story of his lost days, which were in the marshes of Somerset, his old hunting grounds, Alfred disguises himself as a minstrel, brings a harp into their Viking camp, and plays music. The single man the Vikings needed to kill in order to finalize the conquest of Wessex and therefore England. And here he was, trading stories and playing music with them, secretly gathering information on his enemy. He learned the kind of people they were, their tactics and beliefs. He had a king's eye for seeing these things. He waged guerrilla war to reclaim his land, drawing from his knowledge of Viking tactics he studied, his own experience with the land and hunting, and as a military strategist and veteran swordsman. In connection to the burnt cakes story, a small round fungus was named after this. They are called King Alfred's cakes and resemble an overcooked cake, although these are not edible. It is said after being scolded by the peasant, so embarrassed he threw the cakes outside as they would blend with the fungus cakes. They are also called coal fungus because they can be lit to smolder for long periods of time, making them excellent fire starters and transporters. There is also a folk tale that says having this fungus in your pocket alleviates cramps. Whether the name merely calls back to these stories of Alfred, or whether Alfred had particular use for them during his exile or experience in hunting is up for debate, but it demonstrates the lasting legend of Alfred and his connection to the land and the local ecology, showing the essence of the Shaman King. Alfred planned for generations ahead of his own, intending to leave a legacy. He started the reconstruction of the destroyed kingdoms, but more than that, he rebuilt the hopes and dreams of his people. If this time period could be considered a dark ages for England, Alfred all but single-handedly took them in the direction of light. Alfred navigated his people through dangerous, uncertain times, stepping along the webway that took them to the path of victory. A lesser-known fact of shamanism was their prowess as hunters and warriors, often being the strongest in a tribe on top of being a healer, which is why when shamans evolved into kings at the dawn of civilization, the kings were warlords decided by the most skilled warrior, in addition to being wise and poetic. Finally, the Seizure King. But why seizures? Although epilepsy is often quoted for many famous historic kings, the fact remains it is very hard to confirm. However, the historical and neurological establishments have not caught up to the intersection of the brain and mysticism, of meditative or paroxysmal seizures, which are not epileptic, and whose main sign of even occurring is certain behavioral changes. And this is where a detailed exploration of ancient shamanic practices and traditions, kingship and meditative neurology are necessary, in tangent with the circuitry of entire kingdoms, lands. In other words, a cross-discipline study, but not exclusively with modern disciplines. Perhaps, too, the vernacular is simply outdated with the knowledge. Seizures can occur simply through forced meditation, through fevers, through pain, anxiety even. Many things can reduce seizure threshold, from alcohol, sleep deprivation, injury, disease. There are any number of ways for uncontrolled bursts of electrical activity to spike in regions of the brain, without leaving much signs or being epileptic. Indeed, almost every culture in the world has had some ancient tradition that involved their shamanic or holy people inducing these sorts of states either by incidence or through intention, as it would be a prerequisite for many. These extended to early sacred kingship initiation ceremonies in some cultures because these specific effects were desired. Primarily, they are temporal lobe seizures and ways of hacking the brain to take it out of its restraints, both the limitations of conditioning and the security measures the nervous system keeps in place to protect itself. It is like jailbreaking a phone. It gives you full control over the UI and manufacturer settings. The risk, of course, is any number of issues that arise may not have solutions to them. For Alfred, this was his lifelong stomach pain that would lead to his death at the age of 51. It's very possible his stomach pain was acquired in childhood by temporal lobe seizures, which are rare but able to impact the stomach in serious and seemingly out of nowhere pain, with no typical remedy and no obvious source of the malady. King Alfred said it was punishment from God, and in some respect, it literally was connected to his neurological consequence of meditation. I am not remarking on the validity of a religion or its beliefs, but only speaking to the anatomic and biologic, electrical events that must take place in order for these things to exist. In other words, to have a vision or a religious experience, one must possess a body, a nervous system for this to take place in. Alfred's upbringing and religious background from early childhood would easily explain his entering into the seizure states, and he would maintain this state of being his entire life, spending 8 hours every day in prayer, reading, and writing, using his candles to keep a strict routine. The signs of temporal lobe seizures, called interictal symptoms, are hypergraphia, the excessive urge to either write or draw, heightened religiosity, to deepen one's interest and belief in spiritual matters, circumstantiality, to think, speak, and write in unconventional, often confusing or highly circuitous ways, essentially non-linear thought patterns. It may be the result of damage to the normal pathways of the temporal lobe, causing thoughts to take new, interesting, or even irrelevant paths of processing. In some, this can easily lead to nonsense and psychotic ramblings, but controlled, often the most poetic, clever, and new ways of thinking can be accessed, which is why prophets and kings alike were poets producing some of the most famous works of literature. Dramatic change in sexual desires, which can either be increased sexuality or decreased sexuality. King Alfred was, according to his chronicler, always troubled with carnal desires and possibly had a bastard or several. This was likely part of his atonement he continually sought, as the seizure state kicks the libido into overdrive, or in some instances, turns it off. A sense of a mission or being divinely chosen is another symptom. To feel compelled and obsessed with accomplishing some kind of work, as if sent by heaven to carry out a duty. Alfred's vision of a unified Christian England may certainly have been enhanced by this. Finally, long bouts of depression in between extreme highs. What happens is during these paroxysmal seizures, the body unloads its full stores of endorphins for an intense, ecstatic experience, which also causes the body to produce more receptors, meaning even basic pleasures do little to provide comfort or satisfaction. And Alfred, according to his chronicler and friend, had complained of daily and nightly sadness. It is not to say that someone cannot pursue or find a natural interest or motivation in these behaviors, nor is this a suggestion that his religious interests, writing and spreading of education, his duty-bound will to fight the Vikings, and create an England were the results of interictal seizure symptoms, but that they would heighten them, give his body the ability, the drive to conquer these tasks. It is overclocking the nervous system, the life force of his existence and mitochondria. This state is associated with greatness because it alters the brain chemistry and neural networks, so that it's like being harassed or tortured into moving forward, to ascend endlessly, reaching greater heights. The brain is deprived of all sense of peace and joy. Only when it's in absolute extremes can it feel, only for the next moment to be even higher. The body builds a tolerance for its own contentment. There is an eldritch, ancient wheel thing sitting in the temporal lobe that once activated, and the engine turns, will haunt the king, slowly eating away and corrupting him, whipping him into endless chase of ascendance until he rises as a star. In exchange is the total access to the mind, the ecosystem and microbes, the source of strange gods themselves, a dream shaper, a myth maker, angelic mechanism, a bioluminescent program, a rainbow serpent, a thunderbird, an occult keeper, a chthonic and toptic daimon. Whatever they are, the king destroys his own ego, and in its place is the ego of the throne wheel that turns and circles, chariots him to his own table in the banquet of kings. And here it is, the throne that has built empires. This is what it takes to be a true king. This is why he gives up his own life to connect to the land, to be the greatest, through his own skill and cleverness, through his divine ecstatic experiences, through labor and sleepless nights, through training and physical vitality. He must feel what the people feel. Every worried heart beats onto the rhythm he wades through. All the dreams are sent to him to keep track of, to make them come true. In order for that, the king must tear himself from his own life and shoulder the burden of the entire country as Fisher, Seizure, Shaman, and Sacred King.